Hello, I'm John Guswell. I'm in my 80s now, but 50 years ago I came out to this country from England and I settled in Victoria here, in which I built this little boat, Trekker. It was a boat that I dreamed about building as a young man, and it was designed for me by a great British naval architect named Jack Giles. J. Lawrence Giles and Company. In those days, it cost only, I think I paid £50 for the design. And one of the great advantages of being in Victoria in those years was the fact that wood was a comparatively cheap material. And I built a little boat in the back of a fish and chip shop on View Street, Johnny Bell's Fish and Chip Shop, and I remember he used to cook up those chips and he'd put them in the back store there for them to cool down so that he'd only have to reheat them when he got orders. And all the sawdust from my boat building efforts used to settle on those chips, and it used to give them a really distinctive flavor. And his clientele increased quite a bit as a result of my boat building efforts. But you know, in those days I was paying $25 a month for rent for the space to build the boat in, and that was quite a bit of money to me. So I was doing two jobs in a way. I was earning money, a day-to-day job, and in my spare time I was building this little guy here. And I got her out of the shop there in 9 months, which is probably an appropriate time. I think a human usually has a gestation period of about 9 months as well. And we launched her in a harbour there in Victoria, and it was my pride and joy there for about 2 minutes, and I happened to look down the hatch and I saw all the water flooding in from down below. And we had to get her across the harbour to Fisherman's Wharf, where I was, my day job was, and we got a pump inside and kept her afloat until the planks took up, and she then, when the wood swelled enough, she became quite watertight. So eventually, of course, as a young man, I had dreams of sailing further than just around the harbour, and I got this idea of sailing out to Hawaii in her, and because that's really what she had been designed for. And I put some stores aboard, and in September of 1955, on the 12th of September, I departed from Victoria here and went down the coast. And I got into my first gale when I was at sea there, and I used to worry about all those bent nails that I'd put into her construction, but she held together okay. And eventually, after 17 days, I got into San Francisco, where I met with another cruising yacht from Victoria, a boat called Su Hung, with Miles and Beryl Smeaton on board. And I wasn't to know it then, but a few months later, I was to share a great adventure with them when I helped them as a crew member to sail Su Hung from Melbourne, Australia, via Cape Horn back to England. And in that voyage, we didn't make it. We got about 1,000 miles west of Straits of Magellan, down in the Southern Ocean there, and she was capsized in a big storm, and we got into big serious trouble. But we eventually managed to get into a little port in Chile named Coronel, where I helped to repair the boat. And I left Little Trekker in New Zealand at a garage owned by an old friend of mine, Francis Arledge. And I'd been away for 16 months before I eventually got back to New Zealand to pick the little boat up again and resume my voyage, because I'd become experienced enough now. I felt that I could continue on and take her on around the world. And so I spent about 6 months redoing the boat. I fiberglassed her while she was hauled out of the water. a few other things which I felt would benefit the boat and make her more efficient and easier to sail. In those days, when I first started out, all the sails were made of cotton, and of course that was a pretty inferior material compared with what they use today, Dacron. And some boats now have synthetic sails of Kevlar and carbon fiber. But the original sails on Treco here cost £29, 10 shillings for jib, main and mizzen. And they saw me most of the way around the world, but when I resumed the voyage in New Zealand, I got a set of what they called Terraline sails, which is the same as Dacron. And they were really pretty nice sails. In fact, they were so nice that after I got out of the harbour, I put the old set back on again because I hate to sort of wear out these beautiful new sails. Well, from New Zealand, I continued across the Tasman Sea to Australia and eventually went into a little place called Coffs Harbour between Sydney and Brisbane. And on the passage from Coffs Harbour going north, I ran into a cyclone off the Australian coast, which did a lot of damage ashore, and there were several boats lost, but Treco rode it out successfully. And when I came in after several days after the cyclone had passed, I found that the newspaper reporters figured that I'd gone down with some of the other folks, so I was called the man that came back from the dead. But anyway, the little boat made it around okay, and I continued on up as far as Thursday Island, and then jumped off across the Indian Ocean with a couple of stops at Cocos Island, and then Mauritius, and then on to Durban in South Africa. South Africa is a country that I lived in as a young man, and I had many friends there that I was happy to meet up with again. And that was probably one of the more worrisome parts of the trip, because you have to go around what they call the Cape of Storms. It's only 36 degrees south, but the weather is pretty unpredictable down there. It blows hard and the current is strong. But anyway, we got around to Cape Town successfully, and then from Cape Town it was a nice run back up the South Atlantic to the Caribbean, and I went through the Panama Canal, and the fees for taking the little boat through the canal cost me $2.16, which I felt was pretty good value, because the alternative was to sail around Cape Horn. From Panama, I had a long stage then, all the way out to Hawaii. That was the longest stage I did, 5,400 miles in 62 days. And when I got to Hawaii, I'd actually tied the loop. That's where she did her circumnavigation. And then I just had a nice run home then from Hawaii in August of 1959, arriving back within 2 days of the 4 years that I'd departed. I got back on September the 12th, 1959, 33,000 miles. And I guess I became the first Brit to do a solo single-handed circumnavigation. But it was a lot of fun. It really was a lot of fun.